Monahan from Western Douglas County, District 39.
Lynn Walls, District 15, Dodge County.
Tom Brewer, District 43, 13 counties of western Nebraska.
Rick Kalowski, District 31, Southwest Omaha.
Senator Pansy Brooks, I believe, will be joining us. She hasn't said otherwise. And Senator Moorfield.
Senator Moorfield, District 46, Northeast Lincoln.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce committee staff. To my immediate left is research analysis, Nicole Barrett. I believe Amara will be joining us later for bills. To my right at the end of the table is committee clerk Trevor Riley. And if the pages would stand, I'll introduce you. Erica Lano, a sophomore at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, studying political science and sociology, and Maddie Brown, a junior at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, studying political science. Hand your green sheets to them, or if you have handouts. Please remember that the senators may come and go during our hearing, as they may have bills to introduce in other committees. I'd also like to remind you that this is an electronically equipped committee, and you might see us on our phones texting to someone and our staff to get information for us so we can ask you pertinent questions. And we'll begin by LB 432 by Senator Groney. As Vice Chair Senator Walls will now take over until I'm done. Mike Groney, Mikegrone. There'll be a handout I believe you will be receiving. It's got 3 different portions. I brought this legislation to bring to light that overuse and misuse of tax increment financing by irresponsible local city councils is costing the state of Nebraska tax dollars to fund public education. The first handout, I gave you the constitutional amendment that the people voted on in 1978, a good ideal. I was a young man, I might have even voted for it. We came out of the 60s and 70s when inner cities were burning and development was on the outer donut, that we would allow cities to confiscate the property taxes of the schools and the counties unilaterally and the community colleges to use to encourage redevelopment in blighted and substandard areas in what we used to call the slums and downtown Omaha where the riots were. And it worked. Haymarket, the old market. But it has been misused since then. It is now being used for economic development, and the cities are confiscating the property taxes away from the schools for their purposes, and they're not even using it for infrastructure, for tax dollars used for tax purposes. They're using it to bribe companies to come to their communities. As I said, TIF was meant to be used for urban renewal to revitalize blighted and substandard areas. Local school boards, taxpayers are willing to divert tax dollars from one purpose to another for a good purpose, but it's no longer being done for that. The second the second handout is number 2, and just wanted to let you know how fast TIF is growing and its misuse. The last page out of the report by the Revenue Department of the historic amount of tax dollars that have been diverted. I just took the last page. In 2006, there were $30,352,000 of tax dollars diverted away from schools and community colleges and counties. And now in 2018, the report just came out first part of March, the newest one for 2018, we're up to $80 million a year. That's annually. That is no longer being collected, but now used for tax purposes, most of it. A big chunk of that goes to the schools. The third handout is, I had Department of Revenue help me out, where what happens is at the county level, the community college level, where there's no state aid involved, the local taxpayer, the valuation from TIF is just taken out of the total. and the other taxpayers just pay more to make it up for the infrastructure and needs for the new construction. But, and that's also true with non-equalized school districts. The other taxpayers make it up. But those school districts that are equalized, when TIF is used and the valuation of TIF is taken out of the total valuation, it shifts to the taxpayer of the state of Nebraska through equalization aid. And if you look at the numbers on the total on that handout number 3 up in the right-hand corner, was $38,846 was total TIF. That includes the non-equalized districts too, but if you look at the fiscal note, Legislative Fiscal Office estimated $30,500,000. The people of Nebraska, the state of Nebraska is subsidizing school districts that are equalized, where the city councils abuse TIF. Because what's lost in the property tax as the resource is made up by the taxpayer of the state of Nebraska. If you read that Constitution Amendment, it was made as a local tool for local citizens to decide. It was meant to be paid for by those local citizens, not the rest of the state of Nebraska. Some of the ones I highlighted is Omaha. If you looked on the 3rd column of numbers, 6.61% of their total valuation is off the tax rolls of the Omaha Public Schools, which costs the state of Nebraska $17,195,000. Douglas County West, which surprised me, is $1.7 million. Lincoln, which is 2.45%, which is not that bad valuation, but a big area. We subsidized a very well-off middle-class city with $5.8 million in additional state aid due to the abuse of TIF in the city. If you're a non-equalized district, you get nothing. If your community does not abuse TIF, you get very little in offset. What LB 432 does is puts TIF valuations back into the valuation of the schools. And when resources are figured, it saves us $30 million in TIOSA, but it also helps the local school district because now they can tax the full amount. They can tax it at the max levy. They will, because in the formula they only get $1 and it's only for that part of the excess. Now if we allow them to turn around and recoup that amount of money and they do it at what their levy is, they will receive more funds. But it will be paid by the local taxpayer. But it was the local taxpayer through their elected officials decided to give away the tax base when their city council voted to TIF something. They were the ones that should bear the burden of paying for that difference. So that's why I brought the bill. It frees up $30 million in state aid that could be used for better purposes. And it also allows the local school district to fully recuperate what they lost through TIF.
Thank you. Questions for Senator Brony?
Thank you.
Proponents? For LB 432? Do we have any opponents would like to testify?
Senator Laws, members of the Education Committee, my name is Tim C., T-I-M-S-I-E-H. I am an assistant city attorney for the city of Lincoln. In that capacity, I work with a number of TIF projects throughout our city. And we have done a number of things in our city that have certainly improved some of the downtown and more blighted and substandard areas of our community. And LB 432 certainly may impact our ability to do that in the future. LB 432 is no doubt a education funding bill. So you might ask, why is the city even here? Why does the city care about a bill that affects TIOSA? probably reasonable question. And I would tell you it's as simple as this. The City of Lincoln and Lincoln Public Schools work closely together to make Lincoln the best city we can. And that includes for its residents and its students. We are engaged in a cooperative effort to create a top-notch city with a first-class education system. With that in mind, we have learned to work together when it comes to the use of TIF and redevelopment projects in Lincoln. Over a decade ago, the city approved a residential subdivision as part of a redevelopment project and used TIF for that residential subdivision. LPS let us know in no uncertain terms that that was not an approach they wanted us to take, because the tax dollars from that residential subdivision that would have included single-family residences were not going to be available to pay for the school that was going to be required for the kids that were going to be living in that subdivision. We learned our lesson. We listened, and we haven't done another project like that since. Our staff has an ongoing conversation with LPS when it comes to tax increment financing in Lincoln. We understand the concerns that LPS has with respect to tax increment financing, and yet the city's left with this notion that we're supposed to build a city. And we take seriously the legislature's statement in Nebraska Revised Statute 182102, which says that the cities are to eliminate and prevent blighted and substandard conditions, because those conditions have an effect on our cities. I'd share with you a little bit of the specific language from 182102. Quote, "Such conditions, or a combination of some or all of them, have resulted and will continue to result in making such areas economic or social liabilities harmful to the social and economic well-being of the entire communities in which they exist, needlessly increasing public expenditures, reducing tax revenue, substantially impairing or arresting the sound growth of municipalities, aggravating traffic problems, substantially impairing or arresting the elimination of traffic hazards and the improvement of traffic facilities, and depreciating the general community-wide values." These are tasks that the City of Lincoln is tasked with improving. That's what TIF was created for. We have taken that seriously, and we've gone out and done those projects. LE 432 drives a wedge between the City of Lincoln and LPS. It forces the city to decide whether to allow blighted and substandard conditions to remain, directly contradicting the findings of the legislature, or to encourage redevelopment of such areas, knowing that there will be a 15-year penalty for LPS students or property owners of the City of Lincoln for the city's use of a constitutionally authorized, statutorily created tool intended to alleviate blighted and substandard conditions in our cities and in other cities across the state. There's one other thing I'd like to raise to the committee today, and that is just simply a technical issue with the way the bill is drafted. And it's dry, so I apologize. But when we talk about the valuation, the 432 changes the definition of adjusted valuation to a new term, full assessed value. Full assessed value is read to be tax valuation, or for those properties for which the taxes are divided, tax valuation plus tax increment financing valuation. It's a little bit unclear in the bill what exactly tax valuation is, but if tax valuation is the entire value of the property and tax increment valuation is the valuation above what the base value was or what the redevelopment project value was, then there's a danger there that we're actually going to double count the valuation for the TIF valuation. So it's just a concern I raise. Again, the City of Lincoln is in opposition to this, but there is certainly a technical issue there that perhaps needs to be taken care of if this moves forward. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions from the committee? Senator Lenahan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wells. But I don't think you would argue with Senator Groney's point that City of Lincoln uses it, even if LPS agrees. Part of it makes it easier to do is the state comes in and picks up 40% of the cost with equalization aid, or 50% of the cost with equalization.
Certainly that's a benefit to LPS.
Right. So that, and I don't think they're here, I don't see them, but look, I don't know, probably don't have this list, but hopefully Senator Groney will share it with you. If you are DC West, Douglas County West, which is in my district, and I know this is a problem because I've talked to the superintendent in Douglas County West, they have 13.29% of their property tipped. So we're not doing something right here. I mean, Douglas County West is Valley, and they're building $1 million homes out there. So how is it that they got 13.29% of their, so it needs to be studied at the very least, I think, what we're doing here.
I can't comment on what's happening in western Douglas County because I'm not involved with it. I know Senator Groney said the city of Lincoln had tipped approximately 2.45% of our valuation. That's significantly less than the 13 you're stating there for DC West.
Yeah, so but thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Kalowski.
Thank you for coming, number one. Your situation is so different than the metro area in Omaha because of the multiple school districts, former pieces of towns, like Millard was totally wiped out and brought into Omaha, and just different structures all through that. That gives us a different kind of eyes to look at the various areas of TIF that they're working on all through the city. North Omaha, South Omaha, Central Omaha, east end of Omaha, down by the river. I mean, there's lots of different things that make it look so different. Is that out of line with the size of the city of Omaha compared to the size of Lincoln, where Lincoln is with one district, one city? Makes quite a difference.
Well, I think you've just identified that difference. I mean, we have one city, one district. Our district grows as the city grows, but our district is also limited by the city limits. So we don't have Elkhorn becoming part of the city of Omaha. We don't have a Millard Public Schools. We don't have a Elkhorn Public Schools. DC West is obviously bordering up against the western edge. Eventually, you come into Bennington as well. Those are situations we don't have because we have Lincoln, and that's it. And it is a little bit different.
But you have growth in Lincoln. You are annexing and moving into areas in the 50 years that I've been driving back and forth from Omaha. You've had tremendous examples of growth.
Yeah.
Beautiful areas that have been added to the city, as well as your work in the downtown area that has gotten rid of blighted areas and made it transformed into recreational and other areas.
That's right. We've done a number of edge developments, as we call them. We've annexed new areas. We have not used TIF in those areas. We have used it on redevelopment area or blighted and substandard areas within the city.
And you're continuing to grow in each one of those areas.
We do continue to grow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next opponent.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Walls, members of the Education Committee. My name is Jennifer Taylor. It's JENNIFERTAYLOR, and I am an Assistant City Attorney for the City of Omaha. I reiterate much of what Mr. C said. Mr. C and I work together a lot on the community development law, changes to the community development law, and the use of tax increment financing in both of our cities. The reason that I am here today is that, as Senator Groney indicated in his introduction, that the purpose of this bill is to address what is considered to be a misuse or an abuse of TIF by the cities and the city councils. We spent a great deal of time last year in the Urban Affairs Committee working with Senator Wayne and the members of that committee to draft a bill that actually tightened the provisions of the community development law, how we undertake the use of TIF in our various communities, and to make sure that we've put forth guidance to cities and municipalities to ensure that they are using the community development law in the way that it was intended. And Senator Groney is correct. The community development law is intended to be a law that helps us redevelop areas of our city that are substantially blighted. So it might help, I think, to share with this committee a little bit of what we use TIF for. So in the past year, we've had a number of TIF projects approved that include things like Habitat for Humanity developments of single-family housing in North Omaha. What that actually does is allow the use of TIF to install streets, sewers, prepare the ground, so that Habitat can take vast swaths of vacant and oftentimes kind of neglected and dangerous areas of North Omaha, and then actually build affordable housing so that the children who go to Howard Kennedy, the children that go to Lothrop, the children that go to the schools in North Omaha have a better opportunity for their families to actually obtain safe, secure, and stable housing. That's just one example of what we use TIF for. Those are always done, as Mr. C indicated, in conjunction and in cooperation with our OPS school district. So those are schools that are actually probably underattended and are greatly benefited by any sort of assistance they can to get their families in those areas to have better, affordable, stable, secure housing. Also cleaning out areas and redeveloping areas that are vacant, that are prone to crime. Those are exactly the types of projects that are intended to be used with TIF. That's what the whole point of redeveloping those safe and substandard areas is for. That's one project. Downtown projects, oftentimes, as indicated, we use TIF for projects in downtown. Again, unlike greenfield projects or western projects in the areas that we have annexed, where you have no need to deal with aging infrastructure, aging sewers, aging streets, because you've got green land. You go in and you build a street, you put in sewers, it's all easy. If you're in downtown and you're trying to redevelop, you have the existing infrastructure that has to be upgraded, oftentimes is woefully substandard. You also have challenges in acquisition and demolition, things that don't exist in what you call greenfield development. Those are the types of costs that we use to reimburse with tax increment financing. So without the availability of that kind of additional assistance, when you try to develop downtown Omaha, North Omaha, South Omaha, those projects actually become cost prohibitive. Because when a developer goes in and either comes out of a project even or at a minimal 2% return on investment, that's not enough to get someone to actually redevelop an area of town. So you have to encourage and incent developers to take that risk to do the development in those areas of town where it's very, very challenging. We had a project a couple of years ago where the entire amount of the tax increment financing that was awarded the projects went to reinstalling and upgrading the sewer lines from the street to the project. Something that's very simple and basic, but something that was a cost that wouldn't be incurred by a developer in the western areas, but is incurred by a developer at 25th and Jackson. So this is what TIF is used for. And without the use of TIF, many of these projects wouldn't occur. And there is a fundamental, I think, misunderstanding here in what's being presented to you, which is it's the assumption that TIF, that all of these projects, every project that is represented by TIF in the city of Omaha would occur anyway, whether or not they got TIF. And that's just simply not the case. So what you're looking at is the amount of money that may be set aside to assist the developer in doing those developments. That development would never occur. So that money that eventually comes back on the tax rolls in 15 years that benefits the school district would never actually come to fruition at all. So we'd simply be running along exactly where we are with no additional density, no additional growth, and all of that happens in the downtown and the urban core is actually an engine creating density, creating value that helps the whole city thrive. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Senator Linehan.
Thank you for being here. So, I don't think Senator Groney, I think actually said in his opening statement that when you're redeveloping blighted areas, that's okay. I think the concern here is that if Omaha decides to do that, OPS signs off on it, the state's picking up about half the cost, and we don't have a vote on the deal.
Well, and I think that's my point is that it's not necessarily the state's picking up half the cost. It's that this is development that wouldn't otherwise occur anyway. So, but what the state does get the benefit of is in 15 years, when the value of that development, so what was once a $100,000 piece of property becomes a $20 million piece of property. In 15 years, the revenue generated by that increase in value does come back on the tax rolls, and the school districts do benefit from that additional resource. If we don't use TIF, that value never occurs.
Okay, but I agree. I get that part of the argument. But do you understand why there's a concern with, because I'm sure you've heard that there's a concern about property taxes in Nebraska, that when projects may get misused, because I'll go back to DC West, Douglas County West, where Omaha is at 6.61%, they're at 13.29%. And it's mostly green fields out there.
Again, much like Mr. C, I can't speak to Valley, although I do know that some of that redevelopment is done so that they can actually create things that help spur the additional development you mentioned. However, I would say
They're
that,
tipping houses.
and again, I'm not sure what they do in Valley.
So I think, I understand your concerns, but I'm not saying we should just throw the whole thing out, but I think that we do need to study exactly, make sure it's blighted, like you're saying, that you've been working with Senator Wayne, that we're really talking about blighted here. Because Exarban at one time, I think it's all still TIF, right, too, Exarban?
But that project is actually complete, and I don't think there's any new projects coming in utilizing TIF in that area.
But it was all TIF.
It was, yes.
And I know that was a deal made a long, long time ago. But it does make people question when you drive by Exarban now, which has got University of Nebraska, Omaha there, and you've got a new stadium, and you have a lot of new office buildings, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful. But when somebody builds a new building there, but maybe they're all built up, right? No more TIF projects at Exarban?
We haven't had a TIF project except for the hotel, which is not actually in Exarban. It's across the street and actually in the industrial area that's immediately east of the arena. And that, again, is an area that was not built up and was not addressed by the original Exarban Village development. The Exarban Village development is finished and built out.
So are we going to start TIFing everything around Exarban?
Those designations of blight and substandard actually have to meet specific rules and regulations within the community development law. So there's standards that you have to meet. You can't just say, I looked around and said, I think this is blighted and substandard.
I know, but the standards are pretty loose. We've been talking about this for 2 years. It's up to the city council to decide, right?
No,
Basically.
there are standards that have to be met. And I can tell you honestly, from my position in my job, and what I do, I actually review requests for substandard blight. So oftentimes developers will come to the planning department, come to the city and say, we think this area is substandard and blighted, will you do a study?
Okay,
And then we do a study, and we will oftentimes determine, and it's happened several times in the last 2 years, where that area actually doesn't meet the standards, it is not substandard and blighted, and we will not authorize it for TIF.
So how much of the property between UNMC and Exarban would you say is blighted?
The UNMC and Exarban, there's probably a fair amount between UNMC and Exarban, but there's also a fair amount of very dilapidated properties along Saddle Creek. It kind of depends on where you go. If you go up Center Street, south of Center, there's a lot of areas in there that are having some roll off from the Exarban development, but if you go along Saddle Creek, there's not a lot of new development there.
Okay, so that's a lot of land in the Omaha Public School Districts if you go from 42nd Street to 72nd Street between Center and Dodge Street. Okay. All right, thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you.
Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All right, obviously, if you take and draw a line from Bassett to Wyoming, from South Dakota to North Platte, which is my district, both TIF and the Advantage Act are not very popular, and part of that is we don't get much of it, a minuscule amount, if any. And if we look at TIF from 2011 to 14, was a $7 million increase, but then you go to the next four, from 14 to 18, goes up to 80 million, a $19 million increase. It's hard to sell that where they get no impact except the bills for it. And you're increasing 2.5 times in 4 years. I mean, if that doesn't raise a red flag and cause people to be concerned, especially if it absolutely does not impact anybody you know in the area that you live. So, I mean, I'm not sure what the right answer for this is, but I just don't see how we can have this type of an increase and not be concerned about what TIF is doing.
And I actually completely appreciate that, and I understand that question because it's a question we've actually been kind of wrestling with within the Urban Affairs Committee for the last several years. Senator Grotny has brought several bills. In fact, the year before last session, we did an interim study. It was a legislative resolution. We conducted 3 hearings around the state of Nebraska to discuss the use of TIF, how TIF is used, what municipalities do, whether or not they're using it properly or not. The state auditor actually issued a report identifying concerns. We took that report, we took those hearings, and we actually created a bill last year, drafted a bill last year that I think Senator Grotny signed on to, that was an overhaul of the community development law to address many of the issues that were raised by the auditor as to how municipalities use TIF. So I think what also I would say is that we acknowledge that there have been some concerns throughout the state where TIF may or may not have been used properly. But I also think we have addressed, we've put forth that you don't want to your comment, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so to essentially take a school district and assign to it value that it's not receiving in its resources because the city is attempting to grow itself so that actually we can get more tax value and get more resources to the schools and to the counties and the community colleges and the NRDs, that this bill could potentially take that opportunity away from the cities.
I wasn't aware of the interim study, so I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Senator Monahan.
Because this is very confusing. I just want to make sure, Senator Groney, his concern here is that TIOSA, the school aid formula, is picking up the bill. You do, okay.
I understand that, but what it would do would be to assign to the school district a set of resources associated with that excess valuation that school district's not getting.
I know, but they're getting it from us. It's a matter of who pays the bill.
Well, then I
They
think,
get it, or at least 50% of it, from the state aid formula. That's the rub here. It's the property taxpayer, the owner, developer doesn't have to pay it in Omaha, and I get the reasons, again, why you're doing that. But then it comes back, whatever their resources are low, then we have to make it up. So we make up for the fact that the developer is not paying the property taxes.
the developer does pay the property taxes.
I mean, okay, we make up for the fact that the school's not getting the property taxes.
And I understand that. And I think what I would suggest is that if we were to do this and to reduce the use of TIF, then that low amount of resources in that school district is never going to get better. Because there's not going to be the increased valuation that comes from development. So it's going to stay at that same level. By using TIF, it stays at that level for 10 to 15 years, and then there is an increase in the amount of resources available to the school district as a result of that development. If that development doesn't occur, that increase in resources doesn't go to the schools.
You think of any other way we could pay for it besides school aid formula?
That's probably a little outside of what my wheelhouse is. I apologize, Senator.
Okay, thank you for.
You're welcome.
Other questions from the committee? So thank you.
Thank you.
Next opponent.
Hi, Senator Walz and members of the Education Committee. My name is Christy Abraham, CHRISTY-ABRAHAM. I'm here representing the League of Nebraska Municipalities, and I'm so glad to join the Education Committee today. I don't believe I've ever been here before. Ms. C, Mr. C, and Ms. Taylor have covered a lot of what I wanted to say, but I did want to remind this committee that everyone, except Senator Merman, who was not here last year, the legislature did debate a very large cleanup TIF bill. It was LB 874. Everyone who worked on that bill, including Senator Groney, sort of considered it to be the grand compromise on TIF. As you heard before, the state auditor did issue a report a couple of years ago expressing some concerns, and so we did jump into action to try to address those. One of the things that the League did was put together this TIF manual. This TIF manual has been given to every city in the state of Nebraska. Senator Groney's office will get a copy of it as soon as I'm done showing it to you. We also put together a TIF checklist for every city, so they sort of had a checklist of knowing what the steps were in TIF that they had to follow. These were all things that were done to ensure that cities were using TIF appropriately, were using them within the boundaries of the community development law. The League's concern about this bill is we're worried that this really pits the schools against the cities, and that was not our intent with LB 874. In 874, we put in extra provisions for school districts. They get notices, special notices for the four public hearings that are held on TIF. On the back end, school districts get a report from the cities saying, here's all the TIF projects that this city is working on, where they are in development, how they're doing, what's going on. So my point is, we really tried last year to ensure that communication between cities and schools was solid. And in the vast majority of cases, school districts are very, very supportive of cities and their TIF projects. I don't want to say that's universally true, but in the vast majority of cases, it is. Because as Ms. Taylor said, the school districts understand that in the end, at the end of that TIF project, they're going to see a lot of increased valuation, and they want that. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator Patty Pansing Brooks.
Thank you. Senator Lynn Walls. Thank you for coming, Ms. Abrams. So in that discussion of the grand compromise, how did that, I mean, was any of what Senator Groney's now trying to do in that grand compromise previously?
874 didn't touch what this bill does, which is the TIOSA formula and those issues. What I think it was trying to do was ensure that the taxing jurisdictions that are affected by TIF were given as much opportunity as possible to participate in those decisions when a TIF project was being approved. And this feels like it's sort of trying to tear that apart and have cities now think, oh, I'm not sure I want this TIF project to happen. It could affect my TIOSA.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next opponent. Is there anybody here that would like to speak on the neutral? We have letters, I believe, from opponents Colby Boash, Associate Executive Director, Nebraska Association of School Boards, Scott Dobe, Executive Director, Omaha by Design, Greater Nebraska Schools Association. Senator Groney.
Thank you. Maybe I should clarify. LB 433 has nothing to do or affects the city's ability to TIF a project. Doesn't affect them at all. In the grand compromise, as they call it, I worked with Senator Wayne extensively on that bill, and I co-signed it because it did clean up some language and took away some attorneys misrepresent what the present statutes did when they recommended to city councils what they could and couldn't do. It had nothing to do with TIOSA. The Urban Affairs Committee could not address this issue because it is a factor in TIOSA. As far as the new definition of a full valuation, if you read the bill, it's only dealing with the county assessor or county treasurer reporting to the state what the valuation is for schools. Schools is the only one TIOSA valuations is taken out of. As far as a wedge, there's wedges between counties, NRDs, community colleges, because the cities unilaterally take away their tax base. There is no such thing as TIOSA for them. Counties can't fix the bridges. Lancaster County has a problem, but that's another issue. This is TIOSA. And as to Ms. Taylor's claim about taking away funds from the schools, we are not taking away any funds from the school. We are giving them a mechanism to recapture it. Ms. Taylor can pay more on her house, property taxes, as a good citizen of Omaha, to help with the economic development of that community by paying a little extra taxes. She does as a county resident, she does as an NRD resident, she does as a community college resident. Because they lost the valuation, those entities have to pay more. As to this would have never happened, well, guess what? The apartment buildings in Omaha, the residences in Omaha, the condos in Omaha that were TIF'd bring new students to Omaha. OPS, which causes cost to OPS without the backing of the valuation that comes with it. So they're willing to give OPS the cost, but not help them pay for it, and to dump it on the state of Nebraska. No, this would make a better system where the local taxpayers who benefit from a local decision, which TIF is, pay for that benefit instead of the taxpayers of the state of Nebraska. The taxpayers of the state of Nebraska should not be funding a local decision, period. And that's what we're doing here. I don't understand why the cities are here. This does not affect their TIF. This does not affect any project they do. And by the way, Ameritrade did happen and they TIF'd it afterwards. So there is one huge example where the city of Omaha, it happened and then it was TIF'd. So it didn't need TIF. But anyway, and they've cleaned up their act a little bit. And Lincoln really, overall, does not over TIF. They don't. But they are a huge area. How they use the money after they TIF sometimes is questionable, and they've cleaned that up also. But it is $5.7 million that adds to the taxpayers. And that pool of money that we can come up with as citizens, as an entity, as the legislature, that we can give for state aid is being diluted by TIF. That $30 million isn't going to disappear. It would still stay inside the money available for other districts across the board. Right now it is given to the bigger districts who the city's over TIF. So I'm not changing the TIF law. But another one, Habitat for Humanity in North Platte, volunteers build the houses, people donate materials, and the new proud owners that move in pay property taxes to the school. That's an insult to those folks that you're TIFing it also, really. They want to support their schools. They're proud owners of a new home. Volunteers helped them, and they want their tax dollars to go to the school. Know where their kids, not to the city of Omaha. So anyway, no, this needs to be cleaned up. It needs to be cleaned up. It needs to force, let the schools be part of the game. Actually, we give the schools more money here. We give them ability to collect more money to support their schools because they get a tax, the max levy, and not just lose what the LER is. So anyway, any questions?
Questions from the committee? Senator Brewer?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All right, and just since you're kind of the one that has done the research on this, if we go from 2011, 12, 13, 14, the difference was $7 million, and then as we jump from 14 to 18, over the next 4 years, it goes from 61 to 80. Why a $19 million jump in that same swing of time when it was only $7 million the 4 years prior? What's going on that causes that much of a change?
A younger group of economic development people in the cities grabbed it, that didn't have faith in their communities, didn't think developers would come to their communities, and went out and started throwing TIF at people before they even asked them if they wanted to build. And then we had an attorney out in western Nebraska that found his ambulance and chased it and went from little community to community selling his brand of TIF, and he's a good salesman. And it is ballooned to the point where you have to really question some of the folks when they blurt out economic development, and they know. The older people who've been around in this for a while understand it's not economic development. It's redevelopment, it's blighted and substandard. What you're asking somebody to do is don't build on the outer edge of the donut out by the interstate. Build here in the old downtown, the hole in the donut, and redevelopment. It was never meant to be used to compete with Lincoln, Omaha competing with Lincoln or Des Moines to bring a business to town. It was always saying, you're coming here, the customer base is here, here's what we're going to give you. Instead of building out here, would you please build downtown? It has been completely abused, Senator Brewer.
Well, thanks for sugarcoating, huh?
Other questions? I just have a quick question. The question that Senator Brewer had for you from the $7 million to the $60 million, is that a cumulative?
No, that's annually.
Okay.
So if you take, the report's available, we're talking billions of dollars in property taxes that have been lost to this. I will give them this credit, not completely lost. A lot of it's been used, it's still used as property taxes. The attorney from Omaha said, when they replace the curbs, when they replace the water mains, the sewers in the old blighted part of town, that is what it's meant for. It's tax dollars being diverted from this use, the schools, to the community college. The citizens said, we'll divert those tax dollars to the city using it for public infrastructure. But when it's given to the developer as a bribe to come to a community and pay for their cost, I have a real concern about that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Senator Groney. That closes LB 432.
I think it's one.
LB 671, Senator Lenahan.
Thank you, Chairman Groney and members of the Education Committee. My name is Lou Ann Lenahan, Louannlenehan. I'm here today presenting LB 671. LB 671 would put sparsity back into the TIOSA formula. It would provide $5,000 per student in sparsity aid to any sparse or very sparse school district with less than 390 formula students. The sparsity aid, I'm just introducing this as another tool for us to look at when we are looking at TIOSA, and I don't think we'll probably be doing anything with this year. But as I've looked, and Senator Groney, we've looked at all the schools across the state. We have some schools who are very little that have no option. They're not 15 miles down the road from another little school. They are Mullen, Nebraska, which is the only school in the county, and they're 50 or 60 miles from the next school. So it's not Mullen, I hope Mullen, I'm speaking, there's others, but I'll just stick with Mullen. So it's not really Mullen's fault that it costs $18,000 a kid, because they don't have any more kids. And they'd have to go 100 miles to get another kids. So I just wanted to bring this as an idea. I don't think we should be picking up half the tab or for schools who could be merging and spending less per student. Because we do have some schools where they're 15 miles from the next school and they're spending $18,000 a student. If they merge, they could save money, probably provide a better education. But I do have empathy for, we've got 27 schools in Nebraska that are the only school in the county. And I wish Senator Brewer didn't leave. They're mostly where he's from. And it's not, they can't do anything about it unless they close their school and send them to boarding school. That's their option. So anyhow, I just think it's something we should look at, and I'm not going to prioritize it. It's just an idea I had, because like in the formula, we pay extra as we should. Our needs go up. If you're poor, needs go up. If you have English language learner students, which is fair. So these people are stuck with no students, and it's not because they haven't merged. They've all merged down to as little as they can get. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Senator Lenahan, any questions?
Yes.
Senator Merman?
How does it treat unified districts?
Well, it would, and this is, I went back and forth, and I'm not actually, I don't understand how they defined sparsity 30 years ago, so I'm using that same. I think we'd have to redefine sparsity. So unified districts, it would depend on whether they're really sparse. Are they unified because 3 districts merged 20 years ago, but now, they're shrunk way back down again, and they're only 20 miles from the next school? I mean, this goes into how difficult this is, right? Because if you go out to Hastings, they're landlocked, and they've got 3 or 4 school systems around them, some of which maybe should merge with Hastings, but they're not going to merge with Hastings because Hastings is at $1.05 and they're at 65 or 67 cents. So people aren't going to merge to a school district where your property tax is double. So we had a lot of things to try and work out to get where we're trying to go here, to be fair to all the kids in Nebraska. But this was just an idea. I thought there are some, when I went through this summer and looked at all the counties and how many schools are in the counties, I found 27 schools that if you look at them, at least on a map, I haven't gone and visited them, I don't see how they can merge. There just isn't a merge. There's nobody like even 30 miles down the road. They're out there by themselves. Valentine, you know, is another one. I don't think you can, if you've got, you know, there's some schools where they're 13 miles apart, and you look at it and you're like, why are you 13 miles apart and you're both spending $20,000 a kid? That doesn't make any sense. Now, this isn't a lot of kids, right? The vast majority of students in Nebraska are in Sarpy, Douglas, and Lancaster County. So all these problems of all our things to address aren't that expensive because you're not talking about a huge number of children.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Right back.
But this isn't considered a resource then? It's considered they get the money no matter what, like?
Would it be just like we work with, they would, the way I envision it happening is the Department of Ed would know whether they qualify. It'd be part of their needs base. So if you have, as we know, if you have an English language learner, they get more money in their needs side, right? You need more money for English language learning. You need more money if you have.
Oh, it says it is part of the resource.
Right. So it'd be just like we do for poverty and English language learners.
I just wondered where they came up with $58 million. It seems awful high.
I don't, yeah, well, it's the
Because there
fiscal.
wouldn't be that many schools that weren't
I think
equalized.
it goes back to where the fiscal office believes this, and I didn't spend any time talking to them, so I shouldn't, that's on me. Remember when they've said other things that, you know, we have this migration from the west to east, so in the west, their costs never go down. Well, their costs do go down if they close a school, if they merge. So I think actually part of this could encourage some schools to merge. If you're two schools out there and you don't qualify, but if you did merge and you did qualify, I think it's more of a carrot to get people to merge than a hammer.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks, anyone have?
Thank you.
Proponents? Opponents?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Virgil Harden, V-I-R-G-I-L-H-A-R-D-E-N. I am the Chief Financial Officer for Grand Island Public Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the 24 member schools that comprise the Greater Nebraska Schools Association, or GNSA. While GNSA supports additional funding for all Nebraska public schools, we cannot support LB 671 for the following reasons. First, the Legislative Fiscal Office noted the cost of LB 641 for the 2020 fiscal year is approximately $54 million. It was also noted in the Fiscal Office report that it is assumed the component of the aid formula will increase in the future as more schools become sparse or very sparse. This funding, number two, the funding is being generated at the same time several bills have been introduced to rewrite TIOSA to cut funding to equalize school districts that are already up against the $5 levy limit and do not have the ability to raise funds to meet their increasing student needs. Thirdly, LB 671 does not require the districts receiving additional aid to match the funding increase with a property tax reduction. It is the belief of GNSA that TIOSA needs to be fully funded according to current law. Additionally, GNSA supports both a thorough study of TIOSA formula as well as ongoing review processes like the one offered by Senator DeBoer in LB 679 and found within Senator Breezy's LB 314. Then and only then should the formula be modified, adjusted to meet the needs of all Nebraska school children. Thank you for your time in listening and considering our concerns.
Questions? Question.
Hey, you got me up, I'll ask a question. We had the lunch today and had a chance to discuss with folks. And in my district, of course, the one that kind of fits the category you're talking about is Shadron, because they're close on the limit, and they just happen to be in a district that I think is zero impact aid. So they kind of got limited abilities with where they're at now. I mean, with that said, is there any options that we need to be thinking about that might help with the ones that are in this fix?
Well, I don't know the particulars of the district that you're talking about, but generally speaking, for GNSA as a group, we would encourage the committee and the legislature, first of all, of course, to study TIOS and to really understand the pieces that move the lever as far as how much money gets distributed to who. When you think about the original TIOSA formula in 1990, and you think about the components, allocated income tax, funding that at 20% versus 2.23% would be a big help to all school districts across the state of Nebraska. So there are mechanisms that have been there since the beginning that would do what you want to do. You have to step up and fund them. Special education cost. Every school district in the state faces special education cost. Again, if you have the political will to step up and fund that at 80%, every school district in the state of Nebraska would benefit. So we would encourage you as a group to look in those areas, because everyone will benefit. Equalized, non-equalized, it's a fair distribution of limited, scarce resources.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. So if this was part of a total property tax relief package, you would support it?
No, sir, not at all.
Because it wouldn't?
It's disequalizing. The issue is that a school needs to be funded based on their needs. So if they have low student enrollment, or if they don't have the extreme cost factors like special education or poverty or limited English learners, they don't need state resources in the same capacity as a district like the one I work for with Grand Island, where we have all those extreme cost factors. In fact, our poverty rate is so high that 70% of our student body, 7 out of 10 students, qualify for free and reduced price meals. That is an extreme concentration of poverty that needs an extreme dollar amount to help move the needle.
Yes, I think there's many schools in rural Nebraska, not quite that extreme, but in similar situation.
Correct. And so if you think about the special education dollars, if you could reimburse them at 80%, that would free up their general fund money that they're now paying for that, and they could redirect it towards helping the children they do have that are in poverty.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? But you get 50%. Everybody gets about 50% of your special education dollar, right?
Correct.
What percent of your budget is state aid? Versus the combination of property taxes and state aid, what percentage of that total is?
As high as 60%.
There's a lot of school districts that don't get any, or 2 or 3%. So you're way ahead of that
Well,
with
it's
state aid.
based on their needs, Senator, as you well know. So they don't need that resource.
It's not based
I don't get net option
Based on your
funding.
property tax, based on your property tax base.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying now.
If your property tax base is larger, you would get less state aid.
Correct, because we'd have less needs, because we'd have more wealth locally, correct.
Not needs, state equalization aid.
Right, because we'd have more
Definition of
resources
needs.
locally,
Yeah.
so we get less state aid, correct.
State aid is based on your lack of resources.
Correct, and our needs of our students, yep.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, sir,
Thank you.
for coming down. Next opponent.
Senator Groney, members of the Education Committee, my name is Connie Knoche, C-O-N-N-I-E, K-N-O-C-H-E, and I'm the Education Policy Director at Open Sky Policy Institute. And we are here to testify in opposition to LB 671, While we support increasing state aid to districts that are most reliant on property taxes to fund K-12 education, we have concerns that there's no mechanism to pay for this additional cost, especially when they're proposing to cut other parts of the TIOSA funding. And so we would want to see some mechanism to support that. And I think someone had asked how they came up with $54 million in the fiscal bill, and I did some looking, and the last time they used sparsity in the state aid formula was in 2007-8, and at that time districts were classified as sparse and very sparse. So I went back and looked at who was sparse and very sparse, who still exists today, and that's how I arrived at my number, and I came to 52 million, which is close to what they had. So I'm assuming that's the same thing that they did, and I agree with Senator Linehan that if this should go forward, you need to look at what classifies as a sparse district or a very sparse district. Also, one of the concerns I've heard Senator Linehan say before is at the time when there was sparsity, there were they call it games being played about who got to qualify as being sparse or very sparse. So that could become something that would take away from what it is you're actually trying to do. When I looked at that, who was sparse and very sparse back in 2007 and 8, there were 56 schools that would qualify for this, and it would allow their total levies to decrease an average of 18 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So the districts that are sparse and very sparse tend to be the ones that have really low levies, and this would drop their levies even more, creating more disparity between the very low levy and the high levies. And so perhaps other options would be better to look at for this type of mechanism to aid schools. And I also agree with the fiscal note saying that there may be more schools becoming sparse and very sparse as population of students declines in rural areas. There could be more qualifying, and then it could get more expensive as you go forward. So again, we agree with increasing state aid to the districts that rely on it the most, rely on property taxes the most. And I would like to thank you for your time and service, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Thank you. Next opponent. Neutral. We received one letter from a proponent, Nebraska Rural Community Schools Association. Opponents none, neutral none. Senator Linehan, would you like to close?
Thank you, Senator Gurney Committee. I want to thank Ms. Kanoki for her comments. That was very helpful. Regarding Mr. Hardin's comments, I've just come to the conclusion, and I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but the greater schools are never going to think we have enough money to help the nurses schools or the little schools. When you've got a school that's getting 66% of their funding, 60, I think it's actually 66% of their funding from the state of Nebraska, and yet there's no way we can help the littler schools, that's problematic. I love the Grand Island school system. My grandkids are out there. They're doing a great job. Their superintendent is fantastic. But I think most of the people in Grand Island, many of whom probably come from ag background, they would think it's fair if they're getting 66% of their bill picked up by the state of Nebraska, that other people in Nebraska get some funding too. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Did you agree with the testifier's comment that it's going to take a lot of money to get rid of this poverty? That somehow education results are directly tied to how much money we spend?
Well, here's what I agree that it's harder when a kid comes to school and they don't know their ABCs and they don't know their colors and they don't know their shapes and both their parents work. I believe it is harder. But there's no money in the world that can make up for not having I don't know. I'm very confused. If we spend our basic formula, and you can correct me, Senator Groney, but let's say the basic is $11,000. And then if you're over 30% poverty, it's another $5,000. And it happens to be an English language learner, it's another $1,200. That's $16,000, $1,200. And we don't hold anybody really accountable for what they're doing with that extra $6,200 to help those kids that are in poverty. Now, I'm sure they are, and I know they report it on the RAFR, and it goes to this and that, but they're doing a great job in Grand Island. Don't get me wrong, she's doing, you go into those schools, they're paying attention to the little kids. They know that little kids, whether they come to school knowing their alphabet or not, they need to be reading by the end of 3rd grade. They know that. So do a lot of the other schools. But at some point, you gotta think, let's just be a little fair. Maybe we could pick up maybe 25% of the little schools' cost, not 66%, but maybe we could figure out a way to pick up 25% of them. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That closes the hearing on LB 671. Go now to LB 534, Senator Kavanaugh.
Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Chairman Groney and members of the Education Committee. I am Michaela Kavanaugh, M-A-C-H-A-E-L-A-C-A-V-A-N-A-U-G-H, and I have the privilege of representing District 6, West Central Omaha, here in the Nebraska Legislature. I'm here today to introduce LB 534, and Erica is passing around a copy of my amendment 575, which actually will be replacing the green copy entirely. So the white copy is what I'll be discussing here today. This amendment will require a biennial report regarding sexual violence to the legislature from each post-secondary education, public post-secondary education institution. I want to start off with the fact that I have an amendment. The University of Nebraska and other institutions came to me with concerns and suggestions they had for this bill, and I'm pleased to say we came up with a version everyone can support, and I have been told eliminates the financial burdens present in the original bill's fiscal note. LB 534, as amended, will ensure that the legislature has up-to-date information on sexual, domestic, and dating violence that occurs on Nebraska's college campuses, along with information on the training of Title IX coordinators, investigators, and any decision makers regarding that violence. Campus sexual and dating violence is a crisis that we still struggle to deal with, and ensuring lawmakers have the most up-to-date and accurate information possible can only help us make better decisions. For those who may not be familiar, campuses already have federal reporting requirements as outlined by the Clery Act. LB 534, as amended, ensures that this report, along with any other surveys done independent of the Clery Act, are also provided to the legislature. I urge the committee to advance LB 534 with Amendment 575 so that we can take another step on the path toward ending sexual, domestic, and dating violence on our campuses. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Senator, this would be, there's a program in place, I'm not thinking the right word already, on the campuses where we have directed.
Title IX,
I know
you
we
mean?
voted on something in the last 4 years, maybe somebody else can remember. There's already a program, this would add to that.
So this is just having the post-secondary education institutions, not just the University of Nebraska, but all the public institutions, report the information that they currently collect. And
They already do that.
Yes.
All right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why it eliminates the fiscal note.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Bless you.
Anybody else have a question? Proponents?
Chairman Groney and members of the committee. My name is Sydney Butler, SYDNEYBUTLER. I am here today on behalf of Sarah Zolkowski because unfortunately she could not make it to Lincoln to testify today. So this is what she had prepared. My name is Sarah Zolkowski. I'm the Director of Grants and Foundations at Doane University. I am not speaking today on behalf of Doane University, but offering my testimony based on my experience in my field of expertise. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my perspective regarding LB 534. I am here in support of LB 534 that would require public post-secondary educational institutions to conduct a sexual assault climate survey and provide a report to the legislature. Annually since 2015, Doane University has conducted a campus climate survey based on best practices to confront the issues surrounding sexual violence on college campuses. Among the issues covered in the survey and those facing college communities across the nation are gender and relationship violence, including sexual assault. In accordance with Doane's mission and core values of building a better community, Doane shares the results of the annual survey with all members of the Creek campus and the general public through the Doane website. The benefits of conducting a campus climate survey include obtaining information about community perceptions, knowledge, and attitudes relevant to sexual violence, acquiring sexual misconduct incidence rates assessed via the anonymous survey as another source of data about the extent of the problem, providing information about the problem within a particular campus community, including underserved groups such as ethnic minorities, LGBTQ students, and international students, which enables institutions to tailor prevention and response efforts, demonstrating an institution's commitment to addressing sexual violence and building trust with students, faculty, parents, and others. The first campus climate survey conducted at Doane provided critical local information, as opposed to using national trends only, that was used to secure a Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women campus program grant in 2016. The survey not only provided the campus data required by the grant solicitation, but also provided the local context necessary for selecting interventions that had the best likelihood of affecting change. The major goal of the Doane campus grant are to develop an enhanced college-wide coordinated community response for incidents of sexual and domestic violence, recognizing the specific needs and available resources of all campus communities, and adopt a formalized, comprehensive, ongoing sexual and domestic violence prevention and education program for all students, faculty, and staff. The annual administration of the survey at Doane has shown changes that have informed continuous improvement during the grant and the accomplishment of project goals and objectives. As a grant professional associated with the national cohort of colleges and universities in the campus grant program, I have seen the vast majority of institutions committing to conducting campus climate surveys, and not because the program required the surveys as a condition of funding. The awarded institutions, as well as those applicants who were declined funding, saw the absolute benefit of the climate surveys for understanding the scope of the problem for a category of crimes that remain the most underreported in the country, and for developing comprehensive, appropriate strategies for prevention and response mechanisms. As a staff member working on this small college campus where every faculty and staff member takes a personal interest in our students and their experiences while they are here to earn a degree and begin their transition into adult life, I can tell you the reported results of the campus climate survey have been eye-opening and sometimes heartbreaking. Even one rape, one sexual assault, one incident of dating violence on the campus is too many. And finally, as a mother of a talented 15-year-old daughter who has her sights set on attending college, I personally will not consider sending her to an institution that does not conduct a campus climate survey for issues of sexual misconduct. I will not send her to a campus that does not provide sexual misconduct awareness and education programming and bystander intervention training. I will not send her to a school that does not have a comprehensive trauma-informed response mechanism to incidents of sexual violence. Incidents of sexual violence are far too prevalent on college campuses for institutions to not have these basic preventative and response measures in place. Any institution that does not step up to fight against this issue is simply not serious about protecting the welfare of its students. I thank the committee for the opportunity to speak today about this very important issue, and I urge you to advance LB 534 out of committee.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Next proponent. plan on testifying, just come on up when the chair is empty. Go ahead.
All right, thank you.
Who wants to start?
Good afternoon, Senators, and I thank you for your time today. My name is Billie Douglas, Billie Douglass, and I am in favor of LB 534. I am an undergraduate enrolled full-time in the secondary education program at Nebraska Wesleyan. However, I do not represent Nebraska Wesleyan today. I have taken a half occurrence at my full-time job today, so I, as a student, can talk to you about the importance of this bill today. As a student, I am actively part of Student Senate, the Gender Advocacy Place, and Generation Action. Nebraska Wesleyan currently conducts a sexual assault climate survey, and this survey was made possible due to a grant Nebraska Wesleyan, along with, as you just heard, Doan received as well, in September of 2016 from the Justice Department Office of Violence Against Women. The most recent survey conducted at Nebraska Wesleyan University, as presented to the Nebraska Wesleyan University Student Senate in January of this year by Madeline Walker, the project coordinator on campus, had results that were eye-opening, to say the least. Madeline Walker informed Student Senate of the survey results and how they revealed a lack of awareness students have on campus regarding Title IX and sexual assault resources. Based on the survey results, as shared with me and Student Senate this year, there seems to be confusion on who was involved in the process, where to go to report, and the rights that students have as a possible victim of sexual assault. Many students on campus reported, according to the survey, that a student organization, GAP, the one I'm actively involved in, was a qualified place to talk to in regards to Title IX counseling. GAP is not qualified. It is a student-run organization, and the students who run this have never made a claim that they provide such resources. The importance of these climate surveys and reporting these surveys is easily recognized with the results of the Nebraska Wesleyan survey. There is a lack of understanding of what resources are available and where these resources can be found on campus. With only a student population of just approximately 2,000 students and only 50 acres, I can't imagine just how much confusion there must be on a public campus the size of UNL in regards to sexual assault and Title IX resources. Even though Nebraska Wesleyan is a private institution and will not be affected by this bill, I feel the results of our climate survey conveys a need for stronger growth and awareness on college campuses. Nebraska Wesleyan is working actively to change perceptions of students and information accessibility. However, we would have never been aware of this without the climate survey. I believe that requiring public institutions in Nebraska to conduct climate surveys and report them would ensure safety, awareness, and overall make our state a better place to receive an education. I thank you for your time and would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? So your organization helps young people who have been assaulted?
No, GAP is not a Title IX counseling center. We are somewhere you can go to if you want to talk with students, but we are not recognized under Title IX. We don't receive any funding, so.
You're doing it on your own. I mean, it's doing your own.
Yes.
Helping people. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Thank you
so much.
Next proponent. Proponents? Opponents?
Proceed. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Groney and members of the Education Committee. My name is Tammy Strickman, Tamistrickman. I serve as the Title IX coordinator at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. On behalf of the University of Nebraska, our 4 campuses and 52,000 students, I am here today in opposition to the green copy of Legislative Bill 543 and in support of the white copy amendment that Senator Kavanaugh has introduced. While the University of Nebraska supports the underlying concepts of LB 534, we are in opposition to the green copy of this legislation due to constitutional questions raised in the Board of Regents versus Exxon Nebraska Supreme Court decision. Even though the subject matter in that case was different from LB 534, the Nebraska Supreme Court held that an elected Board of Regents has the responsibility to manage and operate the University of Nebraska while acting independently from government control and political influence. Given this Supreme Court decision, legislation which directs the Board of Regents to adopt a policy conflicts with the court's holding. However, after ongoing discussions with Senator Kavanaugh, the Nebraska State College System, and the Nebraska Community College Association about the importance of reporting information of sexual violence-related campus climate surveys and Title IX training that is occurring on university and college campuses, the University of Nebraska supports Senator Kavanaugh's white copy amendment to LB 534. The white copy amendment, AM 575, would require public post-secondary education institutions to issue a biennial report to the legislature on the results of any campus climate survey that relates to sexual violence and information related to all training programs for Title IX coordinators, investigators, and other key university employees. With the adoption of this amendment, it would also remove any university-related fiscal note with LB 534. On behalf of the University of Nebraska, our 4 campuses and 52,000 students, I would like to greatly thank Senator Kavanaugh for her leadership in forging a compromise on LB 534, and I would urge this committee to adopt the white copy amendment and send LB 534 to the full legislature for their consideration. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Senator Panzin Brooks.
Thank you for coming, Ms. Strickman. Did you work with Senator Kavanaugh on this bill?
Yes.
So I presume she created the white copy amendment in exact regards to your concerns, is that correct?
We worked with Senator Kavanaugh in collaboration with also the Nebraska State College System and Nebraska Community College Association.
Okay, so it seems like if she's worked to create that, why wouldn't we come in positive support? I'm just interested how you decided to come in against a bill, because it's going to show you're against, and no one's going to see the little, but we really like the white copy, which is what she's now bringing to us.
Because our opposition was solely to the green copy, primarily based on the constitutional concerns that the green copy had.
Okay. But if a senator works with you and changes and gets to a new copy, seems like that might be something we'd come in support of, because they've worked hard to try to get to the point and collaborated and worked. I'm just interested in that perspective. So my goal is when people come to work with me, I make the changes, and then you go off the new changes rather than what the previous not exactly precise version was. So. But you are in total support?
Yes, of the white copy amendment, yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? I'm trying to see what the difference is between the green copy and the, what's the major difference?
Yep, so the green copy essentially mandated that the institution create and disseminate a survey to our students. The amended version is essentially a reporting bill, which mandates that the university would report back to the legislature on a biennium basis on statistical information that we currently gather. So it's slightly different information than what
So you do a survey already?
We do not do a campus climate survey where we gather as broad information as some campus climate surveys do have. However, we do gather statistical information already. As some of the previous proponents alluded to earlier, their campus climate surveys really gather information to gauge what students, staff, and faculty know about sexual misconduct in Title IX on college campuses, reporting options, resource options, those types of things. The amended version would solely be the statistical information on sexual violence and those types.
How many reports you had?
On the Lincoln campus in last academic school year, so 17-18, we had approximately 160 reported sexual misconduct cases to the Title IX office. This academic school year, we have had approximately 119 so far.
And that's what you will report to us, instead of sitting there and telling me that?
Correct. But we would break that down into categories of sexual violence, types of sexual violence.
Male, female, male on male, female on male.
We would discuss...
male on female, the big one, but...
It would be more the types of sexual misconduct, so dating violence, domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, rape based on incapacitation, age of the victim, that type of criteria, as opposed to the genders of the parties involved.
Do you compare yourself to other campuses, like-sized campuses, to see how you rate or how well you're doing to
Yes.
control it or to educate on the issues?
We do primarily, since I am the Title IX coordinator for the Lincoln campus, we do a lot of comparisons across the Big Ten. So the Title IX coordinators from all of the Big Ten campuses meet twice a year to talk about statistics and things that we're doing on our campus that are effective.
We had a testifier earlier say if her daughter went to, she's going to investigate that.
Yep.
Where that's managed, what the occurrences are, if her daughter would be safe, which buildings are more likely to be, all that type of stuff. If she contacted your campus, could she get all that information?
She could get most of that information, yes.
Most of it.
Yes. So in the past year, the University of Nebraska system started to utilize a grievance management system called Maxient, and we are able to track the location, if reported, of the sexual misconduct. So that is a tool that is available to us now. In addition, we do publish both through hard copy and website reporting options, resource options, information about our Title IX offices on each campus.
Should we change that to say shall electronically submit a report to the education committee of the legislature so somebody knows it even exists and it just shows up in a letter?
I'm sorry, could we?
Well, it says on or before September 15th, each public post-secondary institution shall electronically submit a report to the legislature regarding sexual violence. It's a big post office upstairs where a lot of stuff comes into. So should Senator Kavanaugh maybe consider it's reported to the Education Committee? So at least it has a point. Would that be okay with you?
That would be fine.
Sorry, thank you. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Next proponent? Opponent, I guess.
Good afternoon, Senator Groney, and thank you to the Education Committee for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. It is a little bit confusing. We are in support of the amendment that Senator Kavanaugh submitted today. So as I looked at my form,
Did you say who you're with?
Kristen Peterson with the Nebraska State College System. And we did look at the form and did have a question how to indicate our support of the amendment that was filed. So, as I said, I'm with the Nebraska State College System. My name is Kristen Peterson, K-R-I-S-T-I-N, Peterson, P-E-T-E-R-S-E-N. I'm General Counsel and Vice Chancellor for Employee Relations. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Chancellor of the system in opposition to 534, but in support of the amendment that Senator Kavanaugh brought for 575, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with her very much. Our primary concern with LB 534 was the confidentiality issues, the reporting on the website, the way the bill was worded. Those confidentiality concerns have been alleviated in the amendment to the bill. We appreciate, again, the opportunity to partner with Senator Kavanaugh and to cooperatively interact with the university system and with the community colleges. So we will continue to be available to Senator Kavanaugh for this bill and any other questions she has with higher education. And in regard to Senator Groney's question about having the report delivered to the Education Committee, we would have no objection to a change of that nature.
Thank you. Any questions? But you are testifying correctly, because if the amendment is not adopted, that's the green copy that would be.
Thank you.
So,
Appreciate the reinforcement for that.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. My name is Bev Cummins, B-E-V-C-U-M-M-I-N-S, and I'm the Vice President of Student Affairs and the Lincoln Campus Director at Southeast Community College, and I'm here on behalf of the Nebraska Community College System. And we too were a little confused on filling out the form and are in opposition to the original Bill 534, but are in full support of the amended version. And as you've heard, at its core, this bill is about keeping students safe on our college campuses, which is what we all want. It's what keeps us awake at night sometimes. Research shows that the behaviors and perspectives associated with sexual violence looks different on every single campus. And surveys of our climate and culture provide information about our students' behaviors and attitudes, as well as the prevalence and a measure of that prevalence of sexual violence. Climate surveys generate data on the nature and the extent of sexual assault, attitudes surrounding sexual violence. They inform us of our students' perceptions of the effectiveness of our current strategies. Very vital information. In order for us to keep our colleges safe, we must critically evaluate ourselves to identify gaps in our sexual violence practices, policies, and prevention efforts, and develop an action plan that is evidence-based, meets federal mandates, and effectively addresses our particular student needs. And a student's greatest concern whenever they answer a survey is, how is this information going to be used? And the amended version addresses that, because it's imperative that they know it's going to be confidential so that we can get unbiased and accurate information on these surveys. And so the amended version not only ensures that confidentiality, but it also enforces the intent of climate surveys, that they're a tool for institutional improvement and consumer education and awareness. And the results of a climate survey, what we learn about ourselves, and the action plan is what needs to go into the report to the Education Committee. So with that, I take any questions, letting you know that, again, we stand in support of the amended version.
Any questions? Senator Merman?
Thanks a lot for coming in. This is a reporting mechanism. Say there's, the reports show problems, too many assaults, what would be the next step?
That'd be complicated, but if we find that there is a particular increase in incidents in a particular campus, we would address first what's causing, what do we know about it? We would look to see what kind of education are we providing to that campus? What's the makeup of students? What occurred and why did it occur? Do we need more staff? Do we need more safety and security? So it would be a very comprehensive approach to the response based upon the data that we collected.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Brewer?
All right. I understand what you just said, but where I'm struggling is, if the idea is to keep the students safe, but how is this not basically just a paper pushing drill? What do we actually do to make the situation safer for the students other than just collecting information?
So there are times when, these are difficult situations for students, or even sometimes it's a bystander. And so they might be more willing to tell us what happened on a confidential survey, that we can use that information, than to come forward on their own. So using that data, along with the data we're already collecting and reporting on relative to sexual assault that we are aware of, we can use both. So let's say, for example, the data shows that there's more prevalence of sexual assault that's going unreported on our campuses, but we don't know about it. what are we doing to respond to that, to get information out to the students, to help them to know what are the resources available to them, to help them know who to go to, who to turn to, and what sort of rights and reporting obligations do they have. Those are the sorts of things to compare the difference between the data.
Okay, just so I have it correct, what you're describing would be how Southeast Community College would handle it. The bill itself doesn't direct, it provides a conduit for you to have information, to understand what the problem is, then it becomes a responsibility of the institution to then how they deal with it. So that kind of, I'm on track there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Senator Merman?
It was testified earlier that the gender was not reported. The type of violence was reported, but not genders. Do you perceive doing that the same way? I guess one reason I'm asking is I would think the gender might make a difference on what type of action you might want to take in certain situations for education or so forth.
You know, we don't currently ask that in our climate survey, but it brings up an excellent point that it really should be asked. I could see that in a climate survey. We're not required by Clery or Title IX to report the gender involved in those sexual assaults. So, you know, certainly we could absolutely add that to our informing ourselves of what's going on and what's happening on our campuses.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One could look at this too and say, this is a protect the school. You don't want the survey reported because you don't want people to see that you have a bad climate, a sexual climate. The kids believe there's a problem. That what you report as actual incidents might not even come close to what the perception is on campus. The survey gives you information what the students perceive as the climate on campus.
Correct.
And you institutions don't want me to see that or the public to see that.
Oh, actually, from the perspective of an informed student in the Student Right to Know Act, we want the students to know this information.
This is me.
Yeah, and everyone else. I would want to know. I'm a parent. I would want to know as well.
So I could call up and want to know the results of your survey?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, you can, but you just don't want it published.
Right.
That's the only difference. So it is public information.
It's public to the extent that we're required to report for Clery. And we worry about the specifics. So let's say, for example, one of our small campuses, if any of the community colleges, you know, I think in Beatrice maybe had 1 or 2 in the last 2 years of sexual assault claims. If we report that that campus had a particular type of assault report and explained what the outcome was, that, I mean, you could probably figure it out. It's a small town, and it's a small college community. Yeah. So they would be able to figure it out. That worries us, because I think at that point, the student's going to go, boy, if somebody could figure out who I am, I don't want them to know that, and I'm not going to be forthright on this survey. So that's where our concerns come from relative to confidentiality. I want to protect the students. I mean, we want everybody to know what we're doing.
Fine. I appreciate you answering.
You bet.
Cleared it up. Any other questions? Thank you. Any other opponents? Neutral? Do you want to close, Senator Kavanaugh?
Thank you again, Chairman Groney and committee, for your time today and for your thoughtful questions. I'd just like to address some of the questions that were brought up. Senator Brewer, the idea with this piece of legislation is really to inform us as a governing body, because as was stated, this is something that currently they do collect this information, which is why we eliminated a fiscal note as a result of our amendment, but it's not proactively reported to us. And I think, especially with these extremely sensitive issues that we're facing in public university settings, making sure that moving forward, the legislature has data-informed data for our information for legislating, I think is really important to know what the needs exactly are on campus. I will be in front of this committee next week with an additional bill relating to this topic, which will be a little bit more in line with, I think, what you're thinking of. So this is more just for us to get more information. Senator Groney, your question about where the report goes to, I would be happy to make an amendment so that it doesn't just sit in a vacant warehouse or mailroom. So with that, I will just say that I really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness on this. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart as a parent, as a woman who went to college and experienced some various unpleasantries, we'll say. I think it's really important for our young people to know that the legislature cares and wants to be informed about what's happening there. So thank you for your time today.
Questions? Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so currently we're not collecting the data that you specifically want.
The legislature is not.
Okay, so if the part where I'm not connecting is, okay, we get the data and we're not happy with College X or University Y. Do we then use that to, what I'm saying is, we're kind of micromanaging, whether it be the chancellor or the president. I mean, if we're gonna have this information and we're gonna use it, then do we use it to make them comply with what we want, or we cut their budget? I mean, I'm not tracking exactly what the end state is of this.
There isn't an end goal to this. It's more to just maintain information. But let's say that we see an uptick in campus assaults around binge drinking. So we would maybe want to address underage binge drinking, and not necessarily through legislation, but it is our responsibility to ask questions, especially of public entities that are getting public funds, to make sure that they're doing things. So it's not to hold people's funding hostage, it's just to make sure that we're informed of what's happening in the largest institutions that we are funding, so that if there is a problem, we can work with those institutions to find a solution. I have no agenda other than to be informed.
Can you see how, though, if you were the president of the college or the president of the university, there's a point, if there's enough fingers in their operations. Now, I understand that what we're saying is their system degrades to the point it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And we are saying that we're going to have oversight on this aspect or whatever, you know, a First Amendment option too. But you know, I think there's also a point you kind of have to step back and trust them to do what we are paying them to do. I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt to collect the data, but you know, that's one of the things we used to hate is if you're pushing paperwork and there's not a end product that makes the world a better place. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to collecting the data. I just like to use it for something if we collect it, so that, you know, we make a change that gives the end result that you want.
Well, I suppose the subconscious, hopefully, consequence of this will be that all of the institutions that are providing us with the data will, if they aren't already, and I hate to assume that they aren't, and hopefully they are, doing everything in their power to minimize and mitigate these types of incidences on campus. If they're not already doing that, knowing that they have to report it to us will, in effect, nudge them to work harder.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? To clarify what I was saying, they're going to, the last testifier, they're still going to give us a report. They're just not going to have to put it on the internet and broadcast it across the country.
Right, so we still have to get the report, and it's still public information. It's just, we're not requiring them to put it somewhere other than giving it to us.
And to, as Senator Brewer said, a compliment to the university, they probably should fall down, but it's, we can't blame them for sexual assault.
No.
It's between two individuals.
Yes.
They're providing an education and a place for them to live. They need to make sure there's staff.
Yes.
I mean, when you're 20 years old, 21, you can be in Iraq or you can be in the university. They're not kids anymore. They're hot-blooded adults, but it's not the schools. They're not promoting it in no way. You're trying to get them to.
We're not trying to hold anybody accountable for other people's actions, no. But it's the handling or the process, just making sure that they're doing what they can.
The city making sure there's a cop on the corner when somebody's being assaulted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Chairman Groney and members of the Education Committee. My name is Luann Lenehan. That is L-O-U, capital A-N-N, capital L-I-N-E-H-A-N. I represent District 39, which includes Elkhorn Valley and Waterloo and Western Douglas County, and I'm here today to introduce LB 674. LB 674 changes the TIOSA Tax Equity and Educational Opportunity Support Act formula by altering the base limitation cost growth factor portion of the formula beginning in the year 2021 and each year thereafter. LB 674 changes the base limitation rate to the inflation rate as certified by the tax commissioner and the student growth rate as certified by the State Department of Education. On or before November 1, 2019, and every year thereafter, the inflation rate shall be certified by the tax commissioner as equal to the percentage change from the most recent consumer price index for all urban consumers, published by the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics as of August 31st of the previous year. On or before December 1st, 2019, and every year thereafter, the State Department of Education shall certify to each school district and the Auditor of Public Accounts the student growth rate and the base limitation for the school district for the immediately following school fiscal year. The student growth rate for each school district for the immediately following school fiscal year shall be equal to the percentage change from all the fall membership reported in October of the previous year. The student growth rate shall not be less than 0. I introduced this bill because Nebraskans are demanding relief from high taxes, property taxes. Tax relief will never occur if we can't figure out a way to hold the line on spending. Some districts, such as Elkhorn in my district, are expending tremendous growth, 10% a year. I mean, real growth, like 800 to 900 kids in 1 year. TIOSA formula must take into consideration the differences in the growth rate that various school districts experience throughout our state, as well as the inflation rate. That's why I introduced LB 674. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions?
I'll do it.
Senator Kloski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, how does that percentage you're talking about also carry into the base of what the district is doing as far as curriculum improvements in X, Y, or Z areas, K-12 that they might be working on? How does that factor in that you can do both, that you have to go through a process of improving your curriculum and instructional behaviors of your teachers, and also you're being limited by what you're talking about here?
So in 1990, and I've talked to the people that worked on LB 1059 when the state decided to pick up a larger percent or some percentage of the cost of public education. We were one of the lower states in the union in teacher pay and spending per student. So they put an automatic inflation factor in the formula. I had one of the writers of the bill say it was 6%. I think it's more like 5%, but it's high. So we've been on that, and that's why everybody says it's never fully funded, because that's still the law, that it goes up 5% a year. Inflation has been more like 1 or 2%, or less. In 1 year in the last 10 years, it was negative 4.4%. I think 1 year out of the last 10, we hit 3. So when you have the public sector schools spending at 5% increase a year, but the private sector is only increasing their income at 1 or 2% a year, you get a gap in what the private sector is able to pay for and what the public sector is spending. And that's where we are right now, and that's why we have a crisis. So there is no way really to fix our school funding, and I don't think we can probably come up with more funding from the legislature unless we figure out a way to slow down the spending. They have to go hand in hand. Because you cannot, which we have been doing thus far, and there will be people saying this won't work. We had hearings last week, the week before. We had multiple school districts here, whether it be school board members or superintendents, who said they can't control their spending. Well, you can't be in business paying 60% or 50% of the bill with people who tell you they can't control the spending. Everyone will go broke. We have to have some spending control.
You had superintendents that said they couldn't control the spending within their own districts?
Oh yeah, we've had several witnesses sit here at the table and say they couldn't control it. I think we've only had 2 that have come up and said they do control it. Dave Welsh from Milford said he could, but almost everybody else that testified that day from the school said it was out of their ability to control spending. It's hard to control spending. You can ask every business owner, every rancher, every farmer in Nebraska how hard it is to control spending, but people go broke when they don't control spending.
Where do you factor in the number of students you were talking about, like 900 in Elkhorn on a yearly basis?
It's written to adjust for the growth. So if they grow 10%, that's 10% more they've got in cost.
Have we looked at all the options and what's available, what we might be able to do? When I think back on the last 10 years and the $800 million probably that we lost to tax relief that we gave back to various companies.
You don't give it back. I'm sorry, sir. It's their money. We take it from them. I mean, taxes aren't our money. It's people's money who, because they believe in what we do, they pay us. It's not our money, it's their money.
It's taxes we received and then we rescinded it.
Okay, but it's the people's money and they control their government. And I assume that some of those people thought their taxes were too high and they wanted some of their money back. Here's what another number I do know that is really kind of frightening. So in 1990, again, we were not spending enough. That seemed to be the general consensus, that we needed to increase our spending on schools. But 30 years later, we're spending $1 billion more in real money than we were in 1990, adjusted for inflation. That's our whole TIOSA aid formula. So one could argue, and I have had people argue this, that aid has not done anything to really control property taxes. It's only increased our spending by $1 billion.
Any other questions? Are you done, Senator Klosky?
Yes.
Any other questions? Senator Merman?
For agriculture in the last 10 years, property taxes have increased 143% in the last 10 years. So I do appreciate you bringing this forward. We need to control spending in order to control property tax increase, or property tax relief, I should say.
The other, and there's several, and one of our problems here, and I don't know how to address this, and I look forward to working with the committee to do this. We have some schools out there that are those ag schools, or some of them not ag, that have done an incredible job of keeping their costs down. And the one concern I have about this bill is how do you not hurt those schools? Today I went to the lunch for the smaller schools, and I sat by Johnson Brock, superintendent. And Johnson Brock's got 352 kids. And their cost per student is less than $10,000 a kid. That is miraculous when you compare it across the board. Our friend from Milford, who's become our favorite guy, he's got his below, I think it's $9,900 a student, and he's only got 750 kids. But they don't have, as a superintendent, not those two, so I won't say who told me, they don't have like 3 different band instructors and things that other schools that are larger and getting significant state aid have. They manage to educate their children, and they come to college and they graduate from college, but they have to make sure that they're keeping it within their ability to spend.
I appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Senator Klosky?
Ma'am, do you know how much the Johnson Brock per student allocation was they were spending?
They get no equalization aid, if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm asking you how much they spend per student.
It was less than $10,000.
On the state, they're on the state.
Right? 352 kids.
There aren't many that are under $10,000.
I know.
And
But there
Millard
are
is one of
some.
the 3 that is.
Well, Millard they do a good job, but they also have huge number of kids. We all know if you look at it's in the state formula. The more children you have, the more students you have, the lower your cost per child should be. I mean, that's part of the State Department, the Department of Ed. They probably in an array where their basic funding off of the state was probably more like $18,000 a kid, what they probably would figure they need. But they've kept it below 10.
Any other questions? Well, I'm trying to delay here till my information comes that I've been trying to get, but I think Milford their basic funding is $14,400, but the AFR, they spend $9,800. That's amazing. Because most people send closer to their basic funding number, but Grand Island's one of those I know that's under, and they're landlocked, but the other deal is we have to look at economy of sizes too.
Right. I know we have to look at economy of sizes, and I know it goes back to the first bill I had today. There's some schools out there, they can't do anything about how small they are. They're 50 miles from the next school, and they got to have a high school math teacher and a science teacher and a social studies teacher. They cannot do anything about their cost. There's others that could do something. Other littler schools. This is very, very, as we all know, this is very hard. If it was easy, we'd have done it already.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Proponents?
Opponents?
Good afternoon again, Senators. My name is Virgil Harden, VIRGILHARDEN, CFO for Grand Island Public Schools. Again, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the 24 member schools that comprise the Greater Nebraska Schools Association. While GNSA supports reasonable guardrails on all Nebraska public school spending, we can't support LB 674 for the following reasons. One, simply put, the Consumer Price Index is a poor measure of inflation for Nebraska school districts. First, at its simplest definition, inflation is a measure of how quickly prices increase, or conversely, how quickly the value of the dollar falls. Second, to estimate CPI, statisticians choose what they believe to be a representative basket of goods and services consumed by the population. Third, there's the question of what to put in the basket. Consumption habits change all the time, and estimates must be made as to what to put in the basket through surveys of household spending. Fourth, updating the basket of goods and services is only done once every 2 years. It actually used to be 10 years. So the data is not likely to be very fairly representative, as it's already outdated. Additionally, at the same time, statisticians must account for the fact that the quality of the basket often improved. Last year's cell phone might cost more than, or this year's cell phone might cost more than last year, but it also does more. If all that sounds simple, it's not. The cost, quality, and productivity of the items measured by the CPI simply does not measure the cost drivers of Nebraska schools. Second, Nebraska school districts on average spend 85% of their entire general fund spending on salaries and benefits, instructional support, and administrative staff. In addition, many, if not all, Nebraska public school systems are faced with extreme cost drivers of special education, English language learners, and at-risk students living in poverty. Compounding those cost drivers are both the shifting demographics of students with these extreme cost drivers and the overwhelming concentration of these needs into numbers as high as 70 to 80% of the entire student body being in one or more of these categories, i.e. poverty. Therefore, the cost of hiring staff and the growing impact of extreme cost drivers already mentioned are what drives increases in spending for Nebraska schools, not the consumer basket of goods and services as measured by the CPI. 3, LB 674 allows for student growth, which is good, but problematic at both ends of the spectrum. Please see the attached chart at your convenience. High growth systems would be able to access a very robust growth in spending and budget authority, while low or flat growth districts, regardless of the real spending drivers, would be too severely limited in both spending and budget growth. In closing, GNSA supports a stable base limitation as originally envisioned in the TIOSA formula. The lid consisted of a 4% base limitation with a maximum range of 6.5 per LB 1059 in 1990, section 16, page 23, to be very specific. Nebraska school finance is complex for many reasons. It is the belief of GNSA that TIOSA, as originally envisioned, should be the basis of our current statute. Additionally, GNSA supports both a thorough study of TIOSA formula as well as ongoing review processes like the one offered in Senator DeBoer's LB 679 and found within Senator Breezy's LB 314. Then and only then should the TIOSA formula be modified or adjusted to meet the needs of all Nebraska school children. Thank you for taking time to listen and consider our concerns.
Questions? 70% you say poverty.
Yes, sir.
Can you give me a background why? Is it you have packing plants, right, and you're landlocked?
We are landlocked. We're a city school district, so as the city of Grand Island grows, we grow, and we can't go beyond those boundaries. There's a few variations, but yes. You know, it's the makeup of our demographics of our student body in the community, and you know, they're there and they're working.
Yeah, but I'm a proponent of public education. It's supposed to be the great equalizer. Your school district's been there 120 years. I wouldn't be bragging that my alumni, 70% of them are in poverty.
Well, I'm not bragging, I'm telling you the facts.
But why didn't the school raise their position in life by giving them a public education? Are they immigrants? And I can understand that.
Correct. Some of them are literally in the
First
country.
generation, second generation.
Some of them are, but vast majority of them are newly immigrated to the United States. The parents don't speak English, the children don't speak English.
What's the makeup ethnic of your school district?
Well, I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top of my head as far as the nuances.
What about
but we do have
option
that
enrollment? How
information.
many do you lose
About 390 net.
to Grand Island
Northwest mainly, yeah. Some to Central Catholic, some to Heartland Lutheran. Yep. We have 4 great school systems in Grand Island.
Yes. Well, I will compliment you. I got these, your adjusted general fund spending is $8,500 with 23,000 students. Millard, who everybody brags about, has 40,000 students and they spend more than you do.
We don't have 40,000.
Yeah, we have like 10,000 students, so it'd be just under 10,000.
Excuse me, Millard has 23,000. You have, I read the wrong number, but I read the right number about how much.
Yeah.
Anyway, you do a good job.
Well,
penny per student.
You know,
$8,100 is yours and you got 9,300 students.
We're very fiscally conservative, and we can control our spending. We do control our spending. We've been in the black every year that I've been there.
What's your levy?
We're at the maximum, $1.05 between the special building fund and the general fund. The total levy is $1.27 and some
And you have a
change.
brand new school too, right?
We're working on bringing 2 new elementary buildings on board next school year. Yes.
Don't you have a newer high school too?
Oh, no, that's Kearney.
That's Kearney.
Yeah, Kearney spent $80 million on a new
Columbus.
high school. We spent $69 million on 7 different projects.
But you do understand that we do spend per student, we rate pretty high in the nation.
Well, yes, I do understand that, but you do, I guess, on the flip side of that, understand that you're 49th out of 50 in state support for school funding.
And that we'll agree on, and that's what, Senator, we are trying to fix.
Well, Senator, at the cost of being redundant, I'm going to call this a plea from GMSA to seriously consider a serious study of TIOSA across all segments of the school population, looking at the history of where we've been, where we're at now, and what things we can do to make it better for all school children. You know, my personal career, I've spent 10 years in small school systems, 400 or 500 students. I care about the students in Nebraska. I care about all the schools, children in Nebraska, as I know you do. You have a very, very tough job. And so without concerted joint effort.
I sat on a study, my first 2 years here, Senator Sullivan did an extensive study. They did another one in 1990, they did one in between there. We have studied this issue to death, and more studies are going to find an answer, and I think we know what the problems are.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming down. Any next opponent?
Senator Groney and members of the committee, my name is Connie Knoche, Connieknoche, and I'm the Education Policy Director at Open Sky Policy Institute. And we're here today to testify in opposition of LB 674 because it proposes to limit school spending based on the Consumer Price Index. The CPI is used to make inflation adjustments to household incomes based on an index that measures inflation in the types of goods and services typically purchased by households. The CPI is derived from surveys of expenditures by consumers of everyday goods. The components measured by the CPI, such as food and beverages, housing, apparel, transportation, medical care, recreation, and communication, are very different from the mix of inputs that typically go into the operation of a school district. The production of everyday goods can often be automated or mechanized, thus keeping prices for those sorts of things relatively lower. The Costs for school districts include things like labor, fuel, construction materials, vehicles, buses, computer services. The cost of providing healthcare coverage is not captured in the CPI. Education is becoming more labor-intensive as we give more effort to using the, to be used for things like incorporating special education students into the classrooms and for English language learners, etc. And kids who might have been just pushed out of the system altogether in the past are now being included into the classrooms. The closest thing to an inflation measure for local governments that is like CPI, that's based on the sorts of things that governments buy, like healthcare, that don't show up in the CPI, is the implicit price deflator for state and local government purchases. The state and local price index has been growing annually at a rate of 4.5% since 2000, while the CPI grew at an annual rate of 2.4%. The growth rate has been driven by increases in investments in infrastructure due to increased construction costs, fuel, industrial chemicals, all the things that schools have to purchase to run the school building. And it's important to keep Nebraska's public investment in education in perspective and create funding mechanisms to provide additional funding to K-12 districts. I guess that's, CPI is a measure for household goods, and we think that this other measure may be something you want to look at. And I am happy to answer any questions that you have, and I also thank you for your time and your service.
Any questions? CPI, I believe, works better for what we are doing here, because you heard 85% of the cost is wages. I know that number you quoted, but that's concrete, steel. We bond that in public education. It's separate. Those costs are paid for separately than operations. When you look at employees, CPI is used quite often in pay negotiations and salary increases when 85% of your cost is salary, and we are giving raises of 4 to 5%, 3 to 3% across the board with the bigger school districts. Maybe some administrators ought to start looking at the CPI before they offer wages, increases in packages, and increases in insurance and packages and benefits.
Yeah, what I've read on the research on this is that healthcare costs are the primary driver for this. It costs so much more to provide insurance benefits for employees. And typically with the CPI, those employees are hourly wage earners, where in a school district, they're typically professional employees, and so you have to offer a benefit package to them. And those are costs that can be very volatile, especially what they've been in the last few years.
Have your Open Sky ever done a study from the crisis we've had in healthcare, cost of insurance? How many school districts, like free enterprises, had to change their benefit package? That they raised, that they kept their costs down? Or did they just pay for the same package with no deductibles, co-pays, while free enterprise has done that and raised deductibles to $4,000 or $5,000 maybe if we did CPI, that might become a factor next time they negotiated benefits.
I'm not sure they have the luxury of doing that, but I'm not, I don't do the negotiations for a school district.
You didn't when you were in OPS?
No, I didn't.
All right. Thank you.
I know they did look at doing privatization, and I think in Nebraska there are a couple of schools that have their own insurance and don't use the...
And I don't mean to throw all schools into the same bucket, because a lot of them have. Smaller schools have really changed their packages. The employees want to keep the school open, their community members, and they have negotiated down their health care benefits.
I am aware that in smaller school districts, their cost of health care, if they wouldn't be part of an alliance where they all pool in together, would be much higher than what they are when they're pooling them together.
And you're right, most of them do. And
yeah,
it's a very nice package.
Yeah, so I think they do, they try to control costs with an economy of scale that way as well.
Thank you. Next opponent. Neutral. Senator Linehan. Well, let me read. I'm going to correct, I don't think I read for Senator Kevin Arn's bill, so to make sure it's in the record. I forgot to read those, so I'm going to go back to 534, that's in the record. American Civil Liberty Union was a proponent for her bill, Nebraska State Education Association, Women's Fund of Omaha, Nebraska Coalition of Ed Sexual Violence. Opponents non-neutral, one now. I will catch up and get to LB 674. Proponents was Dr. Terry Hawk, Superintendent Bennington Public Schools, Barry Haybrock, Superintendent Elkhorn Public Schools. Opponent non-neutral, none. Opposed, Senator Linehan.
I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that if you talk about limiting somebody's spending, they're not going to be for it. I'm not surprised. I'm actually surprised there's not more people here. And it's good because it's cold and maybe we get to go home early. On the CPI, that's what everybody else gets. That's what people on Social Security who are trying to pay their property tax get. That's what their Social Security check goes up. Our state employees, that's what they get. It just, again, the public sector can't be this disconnected from the private sector. The private sector's got to pay the bill. So if our state employees get CPI and everybody on Social Security gets a Social Security bump, and I know this, I don't think this, federal employees get a bump CPI, how are you going to allow the people who are paying the bill to get less of a bump than you're giving everybody they're paying for? It won't work. The inflation rate, when they wrote the original, as originally envisioned, but TIOSA is so far off from as originally envisioned, it's almost laughable. There was no equalization aid in the original TIOSA bill, none. It was created in 1997. The inflation rate, when they wrote 1059 in 1989, was 4.82%. In 1990, it was 5.4%. That's the growth factor that's written in 1090. It's inflation. And all I'm suggesting here is we go back, and they should have done it in 1990. I'm sure if they knew that inflation was never again going to be 5.4%, they wouldn't have written it in the bill. So we need to connect. I'm all for connecting the original envision of TIOSA as written in 1989. I'm all for that because they connected it to inflation and equalization. It wasn't about equalization. It was about being fair to kids all across the state of Nebraska. So just one last thing, because I'm going to say this again and again. Iowa has good schools. They spend $1,000 less per student than we do. South Dakota spends $3,000 less per student than we do, and so does Colorado. $3,000, well, let's forget about $3,000. Just to say $1,000 more per student than we spend. That's $300 million. That's a third, almost a third of our whole TIOSA funding. So nobody that I know of in the legislature is talking about cutting any school, giving them less money, or not figuring out a way to make sure that we hold everybody whole. But we have to put, if we're going to pick up half the bill, which is where we're heading, we, the legislature, we're going to tax Nebraskans, income tax and sales tax, and we're going to take that money and we're going to pay half the bill. It's only responsible to have some control on the cost. So, I'm taking questions.
Any questions? I think you were misquoted in the paper this morning.
Probably. That happens. I know, they turned the numbers upside down. I know. But we'll have plenty of other times to straighten it out.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
That closes the hearings for the day. Thank you all for coming.